episode number 1 of the CloudFocus Weekly, entitled Cloud Launch. It's brought to you by Arkus, cloud computing experts, and I'm your host, Jason Atwood, co-founder of Arkus. And joining me as my co-host for this week and many, many weeks to come is Justin Edelstein, another co-founder of Arkus. How are you, Justin? How are you doing?
I'm doing very well this morning. Thanks for asking. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. It's a little on the warm side out here in New York, where we're based, but I think we're gonna make it. So, this being our inaugural um, podcast, give you a little bit of rundown how we're going to work. For this week, we're actually going to talk a little bit, just do some introductions about where we are and where we came from, and so people who are can go back and at least hear the beginnings. And then we have a couple topics we're going to discuss, and then at the end. Following along in the footsteps of greater podcasts than this, we're going to do our picks of the week, cloud app picks of the week. Justin and I will pick Justin and I or whatever guests we might have in the future will pick a cloud app, which basically has something to do with the cloud. It doesn't have to actually exist in the cloud, but if it talks to the cloud or whatever, we'll each pick one, and then we will, and that'll be the end of the show. So for today, we've got a couple topics. We're going to talk about the U.S. government, which just put out a bunch of videos, YouTube videos, talking about cloud computing and how their direction, so we can sort of noodle on that a bit. We'll talk about Salesforce.com, Summer 10 favorite features. And then we'll talk about Chatter, which is one of the Salesforce.com features, so we can't talk about it as our favorite one, but talk about how we think it might be influencing the the way we do business and basically how it's helped us here at Arkus. And we'll go from there. So just to open it up, so why don't you just give me like the 2-minute background on you and where you came from, where you've worked in the past, and what makes you, I guess, someone who should be talking about the cloud.
So I'll do my best to put my best foot forward. So as Jason said, Justin Edelstein, a co-founder of Arkus, which is a cloud computing consulting firm helping folks with their cloud computing needs. I myself have worked with you, Jason, over many, many years,
Yes, you
starting
have.
at City Smith Barney in the technology strategy division, if you will, where we sort of cut our teeth on cloud computing, or at least I did, using Salesforce in particular as my weapon of choice, if you will. Rolled that out to a number of people with a number of different applications running on the system, and saw the advantages of how the cloud sort of changes uh, the traditional IT landscape, and has allowed for businesses to move forward at a much more rapid pace than they could have if they were not using cloud computing platforms to handle some of their business processes. It really does change the way you do business, and you really do benefit from the economies of scale of using a true cloud provider. From there, I went on to work at a not-for-profit called New Leaders for New Schools, which is a great organization that strives to improve student achievement across the nation by recruiting and training and placing principals within urban area school districts. They do great work, and they do most of their work inside of Salesforce, another cloud uh, subscriber. they they do most of their recruitment and admissions, as well as development, which is fundraising in the non-for-profit world within the Salesforce platform, and run another plethora of data systems through the cloud. It really helps the non-for-profit um, work in the same way that a really large company can work, and brings that uh, all those benefits to the companies or organizations such as New Leaders that could otherwise not afford to work in that way, and would generally be doing things on paper. So that's kind of my background before I joined Arcus. And Jason, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sounds like an interview.
Yeah, it
Tell us
does.
about yourself.
Tell us a little bit about yourself
What are your
before we
greatest
move forward.
challenges? It's a
Where do
podcast
you see
interview.
yourself in 5 years?
Sitting here talking to you about cloud computing. My background is not at all similar. I was a business major in college. I came out, spent some time abroad, and came back and basically got into the internet, where I've been doing internet like activities, basically from websites and programming and Python and all sorts of things for many, many years. Worked for huge, huge companies, as we have talked about. I've worked for tiny, tiny little startups. I actually implemented a Salesforce.com implementation back in 2000, confirmed from internal Salesforce records. So I do have some long-term experience. I won't say that I went from 2000 to 2007 when we started doing our work with Salesforce, doing nothing but cloud computing, but I went off and did other things like um, building out, real huge enterprise class systems. And so I, have that experience. I'm from the business side, and then since we've landed in the lap of Salesforce and we're involved in some major projects, actually, we've both spoken at Dreamforce twice each, and so we have deep experience in Salesforce and cloud computing. We use it, we love it, and it's part of our nature here. So that was the impetus to start up a company that did that for its bread and butter. And the podcast is a extension of that, where we can bring some of that out to other people who are interested in the subject matter.
That
That's
whole
me.
2000 thing brings a whole lot of street cred to you in the Salesforce world.
It does, because very few people. I mean, 2000, for those of you who know Salesforce, 2000's like the beginning, and I do remember it, and it just looked, online act. It was like contacts, accounts, leads. That's it. The look and feel was pretty raw, but it was on demand, and we were a small startup company, um, and we were trying to do everything. I was running the IT at that point for a small startup company. So I was trying to get us all into internet stuff. We didn't call it cloud computing back then. We called it the internet, or the interweb, series of tubes. And so we were, really focused on using it as much as possible, right? In any way we could. So that was one of those things that, we started searching around and said, instead of installing software, why don't we just try this thing? Again, it was very, very basic, and but it worked. And while the company didn't survive, the one that I was, the startup, the Salesforce clearly has grown from that to something totally different. Which leads us into I guess, our first topic. Um, so I think it was yesterday. Was it yesterday that this article came out? But
No, I think it's been happening over the course of the last month or so, but it's been kicked back off where the U.S. government has really started to take a look at the cloud computing space. I mean, Vivek Kundra, the CIO of the federal government, for lack of a better term, is really a cloud evangelist within the Obama administration and has been pushing for the federal government to look at cloud computing as a different way to handle a lot of the data needs within the federal government. As everyone could imagine, the federal government has just a lot of data. I believe they have over 1,000 data centers holding all their data,
wow, that's a lot.
which is just incredible. And it's been a topic of discussion throughout a number of different organizations within the federal government. A government accountability office, the Office of Management and Budget, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They've all been talking about how to make the federal government more efficient and how to drive change by making data that they store more easily accessible and holding people accountable for certain actions that they take based on making decisions based on data as opposed to just making arbitrary decisions. And what Vivek Kundra has sort of put forward and has sort of brought to the forefront is, hey, we can use cloud computing to synthesize a lot of this data that we would not really traditionally have at our fingertips. I think when he got into office, everyone knows the story of Obama having to fight to get himself a BlackBerry because he was sort of addicted to Blackberries, as many people are. I personally am addicted to an iPhone, but I understand the addiction to a smartphone.
I hear you.
I don't leave home without it, and I often have it in my hands. And for Obama to not be able to have one, to be able to email or BBM or whatever he's doing on his BlackBerry, Vivek Kundra saw that there was something wrong with that, and has, in the spirit of change, has brought to the forefront this discussion around cloud computing. And he said, I walked into the White House and the technology here is 10 to 15 years behind what the public sector is using, and as we know, the public sector, or I say the public sector, the private sector, as we know, the private sector is oftentimes 5 to 10 years behind what you and I are using on our daily, computers at home. Using things like Gmail or web apps like Flickr and other fun things like Facebook and Twitter and whatnot. That doesn't really happen at the private sector, and certainly not in the public sector. So he's trying to move things forward, and you know, uh, he talks about how people are working on mainframes and and things of that nature, and he wants to sort of change that and have people work on these web-oriented platforms or cloud computing platforms and cut down the amount of data centers from 1,000 to something a little bit more manageable,
Right.
through using public clouds, maybe even private clouds or
Ooh,
hybrids of, yeah,
private
private
clouds.
clouds.
Another discussion for another
We'll
podcast.
certainly put that on the topic of discussion for another day, or perhaps hybrids of both, and using public services such as Amazon or IBM or Microsoft or Salesforce or Google or any of those types of services. His core belief here is that if you get the data into the cloud, you can sort of drive decisions through, looking at that data in different ways.
And I think it's interesting. I mean, this has been a growing movement, right? The Google's publishing a lot now about how cities and small governments are moving to their cloud computing, right, using Google Apps, which we're a big user of. So whatever. I don't know if that's a if I have to give those things, but we're a big user of Google Apps, and it does provide some great tool set. But they're pushing. So there's a lot of government stuff moving to the cloud. I think that for me, you know, again, we're going to talk about this in a cloud computing podcast. We're going to talk about this a lot, but there's cloud computing at its core, and then there's a lot of what is termed cloud washing, which is taking things that are not really cloud related or not really defined as true cloud, and saying, it's I'm going to put it on the internet or put it in someone's data center somewhere else, and then it's since I get to it through the internet, it's cloud. What I'm interested in seeing is how they do it, right? Because if they just go out and say, well, it's cloud computing, and if I use some virtualization on my big IBM main, servers, then I'm using cloud computing, and to me, that's not where they're going to get the government. And far be it for me to talk about the government's utilization, but to get the benefit of that, and we've worked for companies that are as big as governments, if not bigger than most governments, other than our own. To get that benefit of cloud computing in the government, they're gonna have to use other, you know, they're going to have to use other systems. They can't just go and build it themselves, because that's the whole sort of elasticity thing, right? They want it, if you go build it yourself, you can only use as much as you have, and you have to worry about your backup, and you have to worry about your disaster recovery, and you have to worry about your utilization and keeping yourself at 20 or 30% of utilization, or whatever it is. Um, if you use someone else's cloud, right, the real, like the public cloud, all these providers we've talked about, you don't have to worry about that. So then your costs go down, and we're going to talk about a lot about return on investment. So I'll be interested to see if this is just sort of talking about it and saying, we're going to move stuff to the cloud, or if they're really going to start to use real cloud services. And that's where it'll become interesting to me, is to say, if they're using companies that are doing this now, that have expertise in it, that have proven it's 5 times faster and half the cost. If they do that, then they're going to get the leverage. They'll get the leverage that. If they try to just go and build virtualization servers or private clouds, then I feel like they're kind of throwing away, not all of it, but throwing away a lot of the benefits of using cloud computing. But as we know, they Salesforce actually landed part of the census was run through Salesforce. So there's definitely a movement there, and I'm totally excited to see how they do it because if anything, we could take the government from spending our money on you know on servers that aren't being used and putting it towards services that are more expandable and contractable over time. That would lower my tax bill, hopefully.
Hopefully,
Yeah,
and of course, I mean, as we talk about moving to more public services, then you have to sort of trust the service provider that is providing this
right.
public service. So that is always a sensitive topic with people's data, particularly government data, which is our data. Um, and I'm sure that there is going to be a slew of discussions and arguments over data security, data policies. What, how do we control this in a very you know regimented fashion at the government level? So it'll be interesting to see. I don't know if they'll go full public uh, cloud just because of the fact that they'll have to put so much trust in the provider that the data will be secure and it's really sensitive data. But I'm hoping that we can get to some sort of for my own personal benefit, as you said, with tax dollars and just efficiencies at the government level, hoping that they can sort of see the light, if you will.
Right. Well, speaking of seeing the light, we'll move on to our second topic, which is talking about, just to be clear, we are cloud computing people and we are certainly consultants in all cloud computing areas, but our main bread and butter, our, true expertise, our certifications, if you will, all come from our Salesforce experience. So part of this podcast is going to be Salesforce specific, and our next topic is really going to hit there because we're going to talk about our favorite summer 10 features. Just a little background. Salesforce is a cloud computing provider. They have a platform as a service, software as a service, focusing on call centers and CRM and anything else you want to build. They do 3 releases a year of their software. I have been through, I think, 15 or 16 different releases under many, many different accounts. And what's nice about that is, again, fighting off the path of traditional software where you're usually 3 to 4 releases behind because you're waiting for the bug fix for the version 8 while version 9 is coming out. That's too bleeding edge. Let's wait for 8.5, and it's a nightmare, as you information technology people understand. What's nice about Salesforce releases 3 times a year. They almost always, and I put the little star asterisk there, hit their dates, meaning they tell you when they're going to release, and then they do. So this was the summer 10 release that came out in the beginning of June, and they usually do it over 2 or 3 weekends. And they had some major new features. So I'm going to ask you first, which one was your favorite feature, and tell me a little bit how you use it.
So my absolute favorite feature that became available was the cloud scheduler. As somebody who schedules a lot of meetings, because we are in the consulting business and we have to schedule meetings with our customers, um, something like a cloud scheduler, which I'll sort of explain, is the ability to send out a email to multiple parties who are invited to the meeting uh, with times in the email. So the email gets sent out, there's a link in it, they click it, they land on a secure web page that has up to 5 times and dates that are available for them to choose and say, I'm free on Friday at 11, I'm free on Friday at 12, I'm free on Monday at 10:30, but I'm not free on Tuesday and Wednesday. They can put a little description in there and hit save. Uh, that's just one person. You can invite as many people as you want to a meeting, and it really cuts down on the emails going back and forth between multiple parties that say, "Hey, are you free on Friday at 11?" "No, but I'm free on Friday at 11:30." "Oh, crap. Now I have to go email that out to the other 3 or 4 people that are on the meeting and say, "Hey, are you guys free? I know you said you were free at 11, but are you free at 11:30? Because this person said they were not free." And so now it's all done and handled in the cloud on this one web page where everyone can just go and see who's picked what and when. And I, as the meeting scheduler, get to see, all of those things, and eventually everyone picks one time that works for everybody, and I get to schedule the meeting from there, and it really helps to cut down on all those emails back and forth
Yep.
when trying to schedule a meeting with both outside contacts and folks within your own company.
Yeah, it's a great feature. I'll play the well, I'm not devil's advocate because I like the feature. We've been waiting for it for a while. We saw previews of it a long time ago, and it's something that a lot of other sites have. I mean, there are other startup sites that have done the same thing, so it's not net new to the world. What's nice is if you are living in Salesforce doing your scheduling, it's just there. It's another button, and so you don't have to go to another website to do it and then come back and say where everybody came in. Um, a couple things I think that are sort of I would say that need to be worked on. One is the workflow of it is not really known, right? So most people, when they get a meeting request, and over the last however long we've been doing meeting requests, let's call it 20 years, probably Lotus or something came up with originally, an electronic meeting request. They've gotten used to it, so almost everybody gets it. You get a meeting request, you click on it, it goes in your calendar, that's the meeting. The problem with this now is it changes the workflow. So people get this thing that says, "Hey, pick your date," and if they don't click on it or, or do anything with it, it's not a meeting, right? And they think it's a meeting. So I think there's some confusion there. So I know as one of our best practices, tell people to be very clear both in the email before the meeting request, meaning when you say, "Hey, I'll go schedule that," you say, "I'm going to send you something and here's what to do with it," and then also putting it in the actual email when it goes out. um, so that's one thing. So it kind of it needs for people to understand how to do it. And then the second one is that it doesn't work in Chrome. Now I know Chrome isn't officially supported by Salesforce, but it's one of those things that most everything does work in Chrome. Chrome is pretty, it's becoming a more widely used browser, and we use many browsers. I have at least five open at any, no, I have probably three open at any one time. So that's sort of a concern, but I do like it. It also points out the one flaw of the regular scheduling, the regular meeting request, which is that in Cloud Scheduler, when someone says something or says yes, I can do these dates, it sends you an email and you know, um, says your email says, "Great, this person did that." In the regular events, you don't get an email when someone accepts or declines, which is, and we've tried to workarounds, and maybe we're just not hitting the right things, but we have not been able to get that to work. And so, unlike traditional emails with traditional meeting requests, you get back a response, so you at least know who's in it. So anyway, a great feature. Mine actually would be Chatter, but we're going to talk about Chatter in a second. I think it's content, really, content free for all, and it does kind of go into Chatter, so we'll kind of break this from one to the other. But content is for those of you who are new to Salesforce or thinking about Salesforce or whatever, um, content is a company that it's Salesforce bought a company years ago that does content management on the web and has some lots of new features, or lots of features on which I'm going to get into all of it. Um, but the beauty of it and how it kind of works into Chatter is that um, you can just upload quickly documents that you're working on and share them with other people, and that becomes very nice. And I think one of the things that we have struggled with, and continue to, and probably will be publishing white papers on soon, or documents, or blog posts or whatever, is that the ability to do content management now is not the problem. There are plenty of tools, right? We have tools up the wazoo. We have internet sites, we have Google Wave, we have a cloud LAN, or we call it the clan, which is a sort of a virtual disk that we can put our stuff in. We have content, we have email, which is sort of content management as well. And it's not really that you don't have enough tools. It's about what's the best tool for what use case. And so content for me is a great use case for distribution, because one of its key features, and I think the killer feature, the one that I don't think anybody else does or does well, is that you can upload some content, a presentation or or a couple pieces, a PDF and a Word document, put them together in what's called a content pack, and then send them out to a bunch of people, and then track the response, track who sees it and when they see it, and if they opened it, put passwords on it, so it kind of cuts down on everybody getting a single, multiple copies and the forwarding and all that. It gives you instant notification if your client or prospect looked at it. That's key stuff that I think no one else does better. I mean, what do you think about content?
Yeah, for that very reason, I truly enjoy content just for the delivery aspect alone. I know I hate getting, 6 megabyte PowerPoint decks in my inbox. It really clutters it up and slows it down. So I really enjoy it for that feature alone. Also, I think tagging is a huge feature
Yep.
that isn't new. Tagging's been around for a little while, but content management systems, uh, you know, something like a SharePoint, for example, you put content in folders. But what if it's about 4 or 5 different things? You you can't replicate that content and sort of put it in 4 or 5 different folders. That doesn't really make much sense. So tagging to me is a big feature of content where you can sort of tag it multiple things and get to it in multiple different ways. You can also put the content in context of something. So if it's something that you are sending to a specific account or about a specific opportunity, to sell something to a specific account, you can attach that content to that opportunity and sort of see it in context of what it is and what it was for,
Yeah, retrieval
which
is
is
retrieval
which
is
is
huge.
yeah. So I quite like content. I think, like you said, there's certain places where it fits really well, but you know it doesn't work for everything. It doesn't work for, like, if you are working on a document.
Right.
It's not the greatest thing in the world, but it's really good for finished products. Kind of like, if you think of it as sort of uh, the retail store as opposed to the manufacturing floor, right?
I like that. I like that.
Uh,
Good analogy.
it's for finished products, not for works in
Right.
progress.
Because it's not easy
Um,
to open. You can't, it's on the web, so uploading and downloading is a pain. I mean, when we talk about our, cloud LAN, our clan, I can click on the folder, open up the disk, click on it again, open up whatever I want to edit it, hit save, and it's done. And then it's actually distributed to everybody who has access to that, which is pretty nice. But that's just a file system that doesn't have distribution. It doesn't really have tagging. So yeah, I agree. But the reason they had to put Chatter, or sorry, no, content free for all, is because of Chatter. And Mark Benioff made the announcement a day before Dreamforce, or decided the day before Dreamforce, and everybody has to do it. So let me just, I'll just take a second at describing Chatter, because I think it's something that Salesforce is really focused on now. Um, which I think is great. I'm a little concerned that they're actually going to that they're losing that that they're getting myopic on Chatter. But I do think it's an amazing product, and it is going to change the way a lot of people work, and a lot of people work with data. But in essence, is taking the concepts that exist in the social networking world. So in the Twitters, the LinkedIn's, the Facebooks, and the not MySpace, but that it? Those are the ones.
well, Twitter and Facebook, I would say, are
Twitter,
the
Facebook, right?
main two that it sort of
and
clones.
and and to some degree, actually, with this release now, somewhat of what happens in content management in SharePoint, meaning groups of people self-organizing, sharing information, and then disbanding. So that's a little bit in what's happening in Facebook, but not so much. I mean, Facebook isn't. I mean, there are groups of people, but I don't find a lot of people collaborate in the world of Facebook. I feel it's much more statuses. So what it does is it says, okay, take those concepts and then throw them on top of your system, your business process, whatever you're tracking in Salesforce. For this example, we're only going to talk about customer relationship management, because it's the piece that most people understand that Salesforce does. But so instead of going out to these external sources to talk about yourself and to have a profile, you do that within Chatter. So Chatter allows you to have a profile, picture, information. It allows you to follow. So the concept that you like somebody or link in with somebody or follow someone in Twitter, all that works within Chatter. You can go in, you can follow both people, and I think this is where Chatter becomes, a little bit groundbreaking, is that you can also follow things. So any of your data that's sitting in Salesforce, and again, that could be opportunities, that could be contacts, that could be leads, that could be projects, that could be jets. It doesn't matter. You can follow them, and then when they have activity, when that data has activity, it then kind of chats or chits or whatever the bad word that's come out of there. And so it kind of posts its own status. So you as a person can post your status, right? I'm Jason Atwood, and I go in and I go, we do it, right? We use it within Arkus as a way of communication, as one of our many ways of communication, and say, here's what I'm working on, or I just had this, or does anybody know about this? And then people can see that and comment on it. But I think the real power is that you can have other data that would normally lie dormant sort of start to talk, and you can say, if this field on an opportunity is updated, have that opportunity make a statement and say, hey, and then it shows up in your feed. And so it's a very interesting way of taking the social networking thing, bringing it in, making it secure, making it private, making it all that kind of great stuff within a company. um, Again, our company isn't at the size of, let's say, the companies we've worked for before, but I can tell you, just looking at Chatter now, and if I looked at it and said, wow, if I had this when I worked at Citi, let's say, um, and I could go and follow Vikram Pandit or Todd Thompson or one of the millions of people who ran the city at the time, and see what they were working on, and they would post, even once a week, or or Sally Krawcheck, and said, off to a meeting with the something of Dubai. I would have found that really enticing. I would have found that, the breaking down the walls between the million, no, literally million layers and hierarchy between them and me. I would have found that interesting. And I think the people we've talked to who are using Chatter in bigger organizations really love that about it. So, what do you think? I mean, how, you know how we use it, but what are your thoughts on Chatter and how it's being used?
It's interesting. I think Salesforce has close to 80,000 customers these days, and I think the most recent statistic is that 10,000 of them have turned it on. So at least 1/8 of their customers have turned it on, which is interesting to see so many people adopt a feature that's sort of I, I want to use the word like controversial because when you first see it, you're like, it's sort of jokey, right? It's Facebook for the enterprise. But I think people that are, people are, uh, used to working in this method of feeds. So it brings that whole notion of, information comes to me in my feed. The example that I use is my sister. She got engaged a couple weeks ago, and
Congratulations
thank you
to your sister.
uh, to her. I will let her know you said so. And
You'll post on Facebook.
uh, that's right. She posted it on, my mother actually posted it on Facebook. She congratulated my sister and her fiance on Facebook. And my cousins, who happen to live in Israel, saw that. My mom posted it on Facebook. They follow my mom, or they're friends with my mom. And my cousin called my aunt and said, "Hey, congratulations. Did you hear about Lindsay?" And she hadn't heard yet because my mom hadn't gotten around to calling her yet because it was only a half an hour later.
Yeah.
So she was like, we live a block away and or from my aunt, and or my parents live a block away from my aunt, and they hadn't told her yet, and she found out because someone else was on a social network and saw that my mom had congratulated my sister on that social network. So if you take that and sort of move it to the business world and say, wow, think of all the things I could learn about that are happening within my business by just following people that I never would have ever thought to pick up the phone and call for information in the past. Um, that brings a whole other level of uh, knowledge sharing and collaboration within the enterprise that I think has been, it's a gap that is being closed here if people use it properly. With that said, I think it's a little bit scary for some companies to turn it on. People are always hesitant with new features. People are always hesitant with how will we use it? How will it change our culture? Are we actually ready for this
Mm.
as a company? My take on it is to turn it on and let people figure out how to use it, because I don't think there's one real way to use it. I think if you just turn it on and let people experience it, they will figure it out. They know how to use it already. They use Facebook.
And
Um,
that's a huge point. And what I'll point out is like I think the killer feature. We were in a private beta of Chatter when it was first starting, and we turned it on to a small team. Um, and I will tell you, I saw I was at Dreamforce with you, and we saw Mark Benioff do the announcement of Chatter. But when it came to like, I was like, okay, I get it. That's kind of cool. I get it. But when they turned it on though, and I immediately went and posted something. I'm like, oh, this is really oh, and then there's my profile. Oh, that's easy. I get that, and I put a little information about myself, and now I go to these things that I want, and oh, and I click on those things, and I follow them. There's no training on it. I think the only training that people are going to have to do, and this is why I agree with you, if you're not using Chatter, use Chatter. The only reason I say don't go to Chatter is if you can't take the new user interface, um, meaning you're in a browser that doesn't support it. Uh, is that the only thing is that you just have to sort of tell people that in your organization that this isn't Facebook too, right? This isn't Twitter too. This is internal Facebook. So, you know, wow, can't believe Justin was so drunk last night at the Arkus office party is not appropriate for Chatter.
yeah.
And,
If you don't want your CEO to read it, or if you don't want your HR department to
right.
read it, then don't put it on Chatter.
And many of us have already crossed those lines. I mean, I don't know about you, but a lot of we've crossed the lines of who we have in our friend list and who we have in our LinkedIn list and who we have in our Twitter followers. Although Twitter is much more open, so it's not sort of the same. So I think we're already kind of aware that I would hope that when you post something to these things, it's not just the people you think are seeing it. It is probably much more than you think. And I have 217 or so friends on Facebook, and I tell you, it strikes me sometimes when I go to post something. I wish somehow I could run through those 217 people in my head and think, okay, do I really want to post this? And same way with Chatter, remember that you're posting it to basically consider posting it to your intranet site where everybody can see it. And so um, in that way, I think it's both extremely powerful and where it's going to people are going to take a little bit just in the training aspect. But I've seen, Salesforce has some pretty good PowerPoints on this, and they have like there's basically two slides you could take out of it that say, don't treat it like Facebook, and post internal stuff. And if you do that, then I think for large organizations, I think it's an amazing tool. And as it gets better and more features come to it, I think will be much much better. So that's Chatter GA. So that's our third topic. And now, in one moment, we're going to come back and give you our picks of the week, our cloud picks of the week. So we'll be back in a second. All right, time for the CloudFocus app pick of the week. I think that's the actual name we're going to stick with. Um, so this is the part of the show, the podcast that we both pick a cloud app or application or an application that has something to do with it. We discussed it a little bit. Again, we are stealing this from one of our very most popular podcasts that we listen to, Mac Break Weekly. I mean, they're probably one of the most popular podcasts on the internet. Um, Probably audio only podcast, but anyway, it's a great segment, so we thought we'd steal it, and because we can. So
Thank you, Leo.
thank you, Leo. Since the host normally always goes last, I'm going to kick it off to you first.
All right.
So, Justin, what's your cloud pick of the week for the week?
So I'm gonna pick an app that helps with data hygiene and data quality.
Ooh,
Um,
good.
it's an app that, as we mentioned, we our weapon of choice for the cloud is Salesforce. Although we do work with many other clouds, but I'm gonna pick one that is integrated with Salesforce and helps with data within Salesforce, particularly duplicates. So people who work with Salesforce for customer relationship management know that there is a quite often the issue of duplicate data within the system, particularly when you have either a really tight security model where people can't see other people's data, you end up with dupes, or just not well trained users or too many users that like to just create their own stuff without looking to see if something else exists already. So there's a product on the marketplace by a company called CRM Fusion. The product is called Dupe Blocker 2.0.
Ooh,
Uh,
so much better than 1.0.
yes, not to be confused with 1.0 because 1.0 did exist, but this is 2.0. It is a native, 100% native Force.com application that is on the App Exchange. You can go on the App Exchange at appexchange.com and download this. There's actually a 30-day unlimited free trial to give it a shot. And what it does is it you configure rules inside of these records within Salesforce to say if you see that a account record has the same name and the same address and the same website or something along those lines as another account that already exists within the system, as the user's entering it, either give them a warning saying, hey, there's another account with this same characteristics. Would you like to go see it? Or let them enter it and assign a task to them afterwards that says, hey, you may have created a dupe. Would you like to go check that out? Or you can completely block it if you're 100% sure that it is a dupe. So this really helps to actually you know block, as the product's name uh, says, block duplicates. Um,
Cool.
it works with all sorts of different records within Salesforce, leads, contacts, accounts, and I believe even
Does it?
uh,
Custom objects?
custom objects and custom
Nice.
fields. As far as pricing is concerned, if you're a not-for-profit or an NGO, it is free. Uh,
Wow.
Perpetually. So you get this for free. If you are a not-for-profit, you just have to prove you're a 501c3 organization and they will provide it to you for free. If you are not a not-for-profit, meaning if you're a for-profit, um, you you essentially have it is a $500 plus the total user count times 10 per year, which is actually,
Whoa.
yes, very confusing.
Five hundred
So
dollars plus
let's
the
just say if you had 10 users, it would
yeah.
be $600 per year.
Okay,
If you had
so
150 users, it would be $2,000 per year. And the maximum you could spend is $5,000 per year. So if you have a ton of users, like thousands of them, it would be $5,000 per year.
does it work in all editions or
It
only?
it does work in most editions. I believe you have to have the sufficient amount of API calls,
Mm-hmm.
so that might be something that you would have to look into. I know you can purchase additional API calls from Salesforce if that was an issue. You can certainly talk to demand CRM Fusion's support team about that. They have great support. I've worked with them in the past. They also have great webinars that they hold. So
Nice.
when you sign up to use it, they hold live. They're live webinars that do the training. They're about 2 hours long with a real person. It's not just a video, and you get to ask them questions over a go-to webinar, and they will actually walk through the entire installation and configuration of the product. It's a pretty great tool for handling lots and lots of data and deduping data on the fly without or before it even becomes a dupe. It
Nice.
doesn't really dedupe on the fly. It just prevents dupes from being entered into the system.
Nice. That's a good one. That's DupeWalker 2.0 from CRM Fusion. I have not used it. You've demoed it, I think, a few times to me. But that sounds like that sounds like a great and does the duplication is, I mean, other than us being consultants and being hired to come in and help people with their duplication, duplication is a big issue, and so that's something good. So my pick of the week. I changed it up on the fly. Was going to be something else, but I'll leave that for another week. I'm actually going to pick something that is zero Justins. Wait. So I'm going to pick something that is a tool that we've actually been heavily using. It's by a small search engine company called Google. Yeah, so it's called Google Wave. Now, for those of you who know what Google Wave is and have used it when it came out in beta, go revisit it. For those of you who have no idea what Google Wave is, I will explain it now, which is Google Wave is the concept that what happens if you went and redid email from scratch and threw out everything we know about email and just said, how do we create a new type of collaborative email that isn't the same one that we had. And so Google went away and paid some people, and they came back last year, a year ago, yeah, almost a year and something ago, and came back with this thing called Google Wave, which is it's online only, so it's only online. You can't use there's no offline clients for it, which is one of its sort of cons. But because of its nature, it is. So basically, a Google Wave is sort of like an email. It's sort of like an instant message. It's sort of like a note, and it's sort of like content management. So you start up a wave, you put in data, you then invite other people. So you kind of say, instead of writing in their address, you just click and say, oh, okay, I want to add these people to it. So in our examples, we invite each other into the wave, and anybody in the wave can have access to that document. And then the Google Wave has actual structured, both sort of the main wave pages and then replies. So it kind of also acts like a discussion. So there's indented replies and reply after reply, so you can see that. It's real time, meaning if you're updating and editing it in real time, you see the other person in real time editing it with you, which is very cool. Um, but one of its really greatest features is that it has a playback feature. So once you're done, if I start up a wave, or like we've actually started up this wave that we're running our podcast out of right now, and one of the people in the company is not invited to it. Now, if I go in, right, we if he doesn't, he won't see this until we invite him. But when we invite him, he can actually go and hit playback, and it'll play back how this thing was written. So unlike email, which if you're the last person on the thread added in or CC'd, it's always like, oh man, where's all the? I have to read this from the bottom up. And if everybody was very good and always responded above the replies, it's going to look great, right? You'll be able to read from the bottom up fine. But the reality is, some people stop. They take out the attachments, they forward it, they chop off half the email. So then you're basically going back to this thing, going, what is this, right? And can you forward me the first couple copies? It becomes a pain. Um, Google Wave, you just say replay, and it'll replay every step, including deletes and adds, and replies in kind of like a step-by-step motion, so like kind of like a little mini movie, so you can kind of see how it was built. And so that's my pick of the week. It's Google Wave. I will say I tried it in beta a year ago. I thought, that's okay, but what's really useful, it is not meant for you and your mother to wish her happy birthday. It is meant for collaboration. It is a collaboration tool. It is meant for real time collaboration, or even some real time collaboration. Um, and so I would suggest, if you're working with a team of people and you need to keep them connected, and it's kind of like a collaborative note. This is a great way. You can do agendas with it. We use it at Arkus for agendas. We use it for our sort of to-do list that we're doing. We use it for meeting notes. A great feature of it is I'm actually doing a meeting with somebody, running the meeting, and then I'm watching in real time as one of my business partners writes in the notes, so I can kind of see what's being taken. So we don't all have to email our notes in later. It's all in real time. And although we haven't sort of played with this, there is a connection to Salesforce. So there's a way to connect Google Waves to Salesforce, so you could have a project with an attached Google Wave, which sits in it in real time. So that's a very cool product. It is free. It is from Google. I think it's wave.google.com. And the real bonus is it's now included in part of the in the Google Apps. In Google Apps, it's actually included as one of the things you can turn on for your Google Apps. So it's single sign-on. So if you have email, calendar, docs, and Gmail or whatever, and whatever the other things are, you can actually now add in Google Wave, so you can single sign into that. So as a company, if you're using Google Apps, it's built in. It's and so is your directory and all that. Great stuff. I mean, you use it. Do you like it?
I love it.
Yeah.
I think how you described it as like try and forget what you know about email before you use Wave. Otherwise, you'll be sort of like a eh.
Right.
And also, really use it in a group function
Right.
because it's not really, one to one is okay, but it's really for, collaboration between groups of people that need to get things done. Um, and they really did sort of reimagine what if email and chat and things of that nature didn't exist? What could it
Right.
look like using technologies that exist today? And they did a pretty good job with it. And it's not even it's not done.
Yeah.
So it'll be
They did.
interesting.
They added on a new feature the other day. Did you notice what they did?
Yeah, you can add any email address to a wave. I don't know if that's what you're
Not that
thinking
one.
of. What,
They
what,
actually changed something. Look at where if you have things
Oh,
collapsed.
collapse things actually go to the bottom of the screen as opposed to
Uh
the
huh.
top. Yeah,
Uh
I
huh.
mean, play around. They change it. It is a cloud service, so it does
Right.
change and you know
And
real
that would be
time type of
that would
stuff.
be my warning to anybody using it is don't use it to write the budget for your next company. Don't use it for that term paper you're going to write that you need to hand in next week because it is it I don't it's still in Google Labs, so it's still kind of in what they call beta. And there are some bugs with it. It sometimes crashes. It doesn't work very well on every platform. It does work on the iPhone. It does not work on the iPad. It is web-based only, and it does tax the browser. I mean, the browser kind of, the newest browsers, Safari 5 and Chrome, of course, eat it up nicely. I know if I hit it with an older browser, it would not work as well. So again, collaborative stuff that you can then, I would say it's not for permanent storage. You do it, you work on it, and what we do as best practice is we then export it as a PDF. And so at the end, when we're done with it, we just export it as a PDF and then attach it into Salesforce to the record. So if it's a client or whatever, at the end of the project or at the end of the meeting, we can then attach it and then it's permanent forever and someone can go look it up. So those are ours. So those are the picks of the week. And I would like to thank you for stopping by the Cloud Focused podcast. We will be back in short order, and hopefully you enjoyed it. I'd like to thank you, Justin, for stopping by as well, for being my co host this week, and hopefully many weeks to come.
Well, thank you.
And we'll see you next time.